Some forms of hidden hatred do not come for your life in obvious ways. They do something quieter. They move closer to your identity, to your dignity, to the way other people see you, and over time, to the way you begin to see yourself. My name is Brian Vale, and in this second part we are going deeper into the patterns that do not just hurt for a moment. They settle in slowly. They interfere with your sense of self. They make you question your place, your value, and sometimes even your right to remain fully yourself around other people. If you did not see the first part, that is perfectly fine. This conversation still stands on its own. But this is the point in the series where things become more personal, more invasive, and in many ways more dangerous. Because there are people who do not need to insult you openly in order to diminish you. They can do it more subtly, through the way they address you, through the way they handle what you trusted them with, through the way they make you feel present yet somehow unwelcome. And that is where we begin today, with one of the quietest signs of all, one that many people dismiss for far too long because it sounds too small to matter. But it does matter, much more than most people think. Sign 4 is name distortion. People often wave it off and say, "Oh, come on, why are you making such a big deal out of it? It's just words, it's a joke, it's friendly." But over time I came to understand something very important. A person's name is not a small thing. It is one of the most personal signs of their dignity. And the person who keeps twisting that sign is rarely doing it by accident. I call this name distortion, or to put it more clearly, a quiet attempt to take a person's face away from them. The pattern is simple but deeply unpleasant. Each of us has a name, and each of us has a way we choose to present ourselves to the world. That is not just a sound. It is part of our inner structure, part of the way we feel our own boundaries. And then someone appears who starts calling you something else, with a smile, as if it is harmless, light, even affectionate. You say, "Please call me Alexander," and they answer, "Oh, relax, Alex, don't be so serious." You say, "I don't like being called Katie, I prefer Catherine," and they respond, "Oh, come on, it's cute." On the surface, it can look almost harmless, but very often there is a struggle for power underneath it. When someone deliberately changes your name, uses a form that makes you uncomfortable, or keeps doing it after you have clearly asked them to stop, they are showing you something very simple. Your preference means nothing to them. Without saying it directly, they are telling you, "I will define you myself. I will address you in the way that suits me, and I do not care what you feel." That is a hidden form of humiliation, because your name is tied to your scale, to your age, to your place among other people. When a grown, respected person is deliberately reduced through their name, turned into a smaller, softer, almost childish version of themselves, the point is not closeness. The point is to lower them, to trim down their inner height, to bring them slightly beneath where they stand, to remind them that someone nearby feels entitled to treat them without respect. What makes this especially ugly is that the moment you object, you are often made to look like the problem. They say, "What is wrong with you? Can't you take a joke? Why are you so sensitive?" And that is the moment many people start doubting themselves. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe it really is nothing. But no, it is not nothing. Your name stays with you your whole life. And if someone clearly hears how you want to be addressed, but keeps calling you something else anyway, then they are not arguing over a word. They are arguing with your right to define yourself. I want to tell you a story that showed me very clearly how a name can become a weapon. There was a man in our town named David. He was an excellent doctor. People came to him from neighboring towns because he had both skill and rare human sensitivity. He was tall, calm, already beginning to go gray, with a deeply attentive gaze. People respected him sincerely. When they spoke about him, they called him Dr. David, and in the way they said it, you could hear recognition of the place he held in other people's lives. But he had an old acquaintance. Let's call him Bernard. Bernard had never become much in life. He inherited the family store, lived an ordinary life, and as far as I could tell back then, something dark had been building inside him for years. And every time he ran into David in public, at a celebration, on the street, in a store, he would deliberately call out across the room or across the sidewalk, "Hey, Davy! Davy, over here! How are you, Davy?" David hated that name. To him, it sounded small, diminishing, almost humiliating. It pulled him backward into an older version of himself he had long outgrown. More than once, he took Bernard aside and asked him calmly, "Please don't call me that. I don't like it. Call me David." And what did Bernard do? He would slap him on the shoulder, laugh loudly, and say, "Oh, look at you. Maybe you're Dr. David to everyone else, but to me, you're Davy. We go too far back for all this importance." And people around them would smirk. Not because David had done anything funny, but because for a moment Bernard had managed to turn him into a smaller version of himself. And that was the whole point. Bernard could not rise to David's level. He could not become as respected, as useful, or as meaningful to others. So he chose another route. Instead of rising himself, he tried to bring the other man down a little, to make him smaller, even if only for a moment, to erase part of the respect that lived inside his name. I remember one day seeing David walking down the street while that voice came from behind him again. "Davy, wait up." And in that moment, what struck me most was how much a person's posture can change when they are reduced again and again in a place where they have every right to stand tall. And that is when one thing became very clear to me. When someone keeps distorting your name after you have clearly stated your boundary, they are not trying to rename you. They are trying to redefine you. They want the right to your face to belong to them, not to you. In time, David simply stopped dealing with Bernard. He no longer stopped for him, no longer explained, no longer argued. And what was interesting was this. Very soon, a certain calm returned to his face, a calm that always seemed to disappear around Bernard. So if there is someone in your life who keeps calling you by a name you did not choose, if they keep doing it with a smile under the cover of closeness, simplicity, or humor, do not fool yourself. It is not always friendship. Sometimes it is a quiet war against your identity. Take your name back, and you take back part of your strength. Sign 5 is the exposure of secrets. We have already talked about different masks of hidden hostility, but this one is among the stickiest, the dirtiest, and the most dangerous. Because here, the person is not taking your time, not just your peace, not just your name. They are taking something you gave them willingly, something you revealed because you believed they were safe. I call this sign the exposure of secrets, or, more simply, a person with a leaking mouth. The heart of this betrayal is one terrible thing. You trust someone with your secret, your pain, your weakness, your difficult moment, and then one day you discover that it is no longer between the two of you. It is out in the open. And what makes this especially vile is the way it is usually done, not as a direct attack, not as an obvious act of betrayal, but as if it just slipped out, as if it happened casually, as if they simply were not thinking. But in reality, that appearance of accident is exactly what makes it even more cruel. Picture the scene. You are sitting with friends, colleagues, or acquaintances. The mood is relaxed. People are talking, laughing, feeling comfortable. Then suddenly, someone you thought was close to you says out loud in front of everyone, "By the way, how are things going with that issue in your marriage? Have you decided whether you're getting divorced or not?" Or, "You said you've been having money problems lately. If you want, I can lend you some right now." The air in the room changes immediately. People go quiet. Some look away. Others start looking at you too closely. You feel the blood rush to your face. You feel your body tighten. You want to disappear on the spot. And then that same person puts on a startled expression, covers their mouth and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought everyone already knew. I didn't mean to." Do not believe that. Things like this are very rarely truly accidental, especially when the subject is personal, vulnerable, and important to you. A person who respects you can feel the line between private and public. But the person who reveals your secrets in front of others is usually doing it because they want the effect, your embarrassment, your confusion, your humiliation. Why is it so destructive? Because a secret is not just information. It is part of your inner territory. When we trust someone with something private, we take off our armor. We open a door to a place where strangers are not allowed. And if that person then carries your secret out into the open, they are doing much more than just saying too much. They are showing you that your trust means nothing to them. And very often, the real goal is not even the information itself. The goal is the moment, that exact second when you go red, when you do not know what to say, when you start trying to explain yourself, when other people begin to look at you differently. That is what gives them their hidden satisfaction. It is as if they strip you in front of a crowd and then hide behind the line, "I didn't mean it." Then comes the even uglier part. If you react, if you object, if you say that what they did was unacceptable, it becomes very easy for them to make you look dramatic, difficult, or oversensitive. They say, "I already apologized. Why are you getting so worked up? I didn't mean any harm." And suddenly they are no longer the betrayer. You are the problem. They are no longer the one who crossed a line. You are just too sensitive. But the truth is very simple. The person who once took pleasure in exposing your private life in public has already shown you who they are. And if you trust them again after that, you are not giving them a second chance. You are simply bringing your vulnerability back to the same place a second time. I want to tell you a story that stayed with me very deeply. By then I was no longer a child, but I was still learning a great deal by watching the people around me. In our town there was a respected man. Let's call him George. He was well off, influential, generous to others, and sincerely respected. People knew him as reliable, composed, and strong. But there was something in his past that he kept hidden from almost everyone. When he was young, before he became the man people now knew, he made a serious mistake. He fell in with the wrong crowd, got pulled into bad company, and even spent a few months in prison for a minor crime. Later, he completely changed his life. He became a different man. He built an honest name for himself, and very few people knew about that old chapter, because it was something long lived through and long put behind him. At a large family celebration, one of his old acquaintances was there. Let's call him Jack. Jack was always nearby, always smiling, always saying the right things, but there was something in his smile that felt too smooth, too practiced. People like that often make a good impression right up until the moment it becomes useful for them to show who they really are. At the height of the evening, George was seated at the head of the table, surrounded by family, children, and close friends. People were raising glasses, speaking about his decency, his strength, and how much he had done for others. Then at one point, Jack stood up. Glass in hand, smiling broadly, he spoke loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "George, when I look at you tonight, I always think about how far you've come. Who could have imagined, back when you were sitting in a prison cell surrounded by thieves and had no idea what would become of you, that one day you'd be here, successful, respected, and admired by everyone. Now that is what I call a real transformation. To you, my friend." After those words, the room fell silent. Not the good kind of silence when people are moved, the dead kind, the kind where something irreversible has already happened. The smile disappeared from George's face. His wife went pale. Some people lowered their eyes. Others started glancing at each other. The entire evening, the whole atmosphere of respect that a man had built over years was pierced by a single sentence. And Jack stood there looking as if he had said something warm and inspiring. When the tension became obvious, he even added, "What? I just wanted to show how much you've changed. It's a story of strength." But it was not a story of strength. It was a precise strike into the place where that man had once carried his deepest wound. I remember that later, when we stepped outside, I felt physically shaken by what I had just seen. And one thought became absolutely clear to me. There are people who wait for years for the right moment to drag your past, your weakness, or your pain into the light, not for truth, but for power, so they can destroy, even for 1 minute, the height you worked so hard to reach. That night, Jack was not sharing someone else's story. He was not admiring George. He was not supporting him. He had simply chosen the perfect moment to remind him of the thing he most wanted to leave behind. And he did it in a way that still allowed him to hide behind good intentions. That is why I tell you this. Do not judge only by words. Judge by what follows them. If someone's accidental honesty leaves you standing there drained, humiliated, and exposed, then you are not looking at a friend. You are looking at someone who uses closeness as a tool to gain access to your weak points. So if you notice that someone around you enjoys telling other people's secrets, Even under the cover of sincerity, understand this: your secrets are already unsafe with them. If a person reveals what belongs to someone else, one day they will reveal what belongs to you. And if they have already exposed something personal about you once, then covered it with excuses, chatter, and false innocence, do not give them a second chance. Let people think you are private. That is far better than becoming convenient material for someone else's public performance. Your private life is not a stage for another person's dramatic line. Protect it. Sign 6 is exclusion from the circle. This is one of the oldest and most painful signals a person can experience in the presence of others. I call it exclusion from the circle, or, to put it more precisely, the invisible wall you suddenly begin to feel around yourself. A lot of people think hatred has to be loud. They think it has to show up as open rudeness, conflict, or direct humiliation. But that is not always true. Sometimes the coldest form of hostility is not an attack. It is the absence of space for you. Not a shout, but a silent push outward. Not a strike, but a refusal to truly acknowledge your presence. The heart of this sign is simple. You begin to get pushed out of the space, physically, emotionally, socially. And it is done in a way that leaves you with nothing concrete to point to. No obvious scene, no open rejection, no clear proof, just a feeling, just coldness, just the constant sense that you are near, but not inside. You have probably experienced this before. You walk up to a group of people, co-workers, friends, relatives. They are standing in a circle, talking, laughing, discussing something. You approach naturally, expecting to join them, and then you notice it. No one moves. No one makes even the smallest shift to let you in. They keep standing exactly as they were, as if the space is already sealed, as if your presence requires no response at all. Or picture another version. You are sitting at a shared table. Someone is telling a story, joking, carrying the conversation. They look at one person, then another, then another. Their attention moves around the table as if they are silently confirming to each person, "I see you. You are here. You belong in this exchange." But when their gaze reaches you, it simply passes over you, as if your chair were empty, as if you were transparent. And what do you begin to feel in moments like that? Not just awkwardness, something deeper, a coldness inside, a tightening, a sudden doubt in yourself. You start searching for the reason in you. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I came over at the wrong time. Maybe I look wrong. Maybe there is something unpleasant about me. And very often that is the moment a person starts to shrink. They begin speaking more quietly. They hunch. They try harder to be liked. They laugh a little louder than they want to. They agree too quickly. They look for some way to earn the right to be noticed, to receive even the smallest crumb of inclusion, any sign at all that there is still a place for them. But there is something important you need to understand. Very often the problem is not you. The problem is that what stands in front of you is a cruel game of status and belonging. The person who keeps the circle closed, the person who does not step back even half a step to make room for you, often knows exactly what they are doing. It is an ancient signal, and people read it on an almost animal level. You are not one of us. There is no place for you here. And that is exactly why it hurts so much. Because long ago, to be pushed out of the circle was almost the same thing as being abandoned to die. One person alone could not survive. They needed the group, the fire, the shelter, the sense of belonging. And that is why, even now, exclusion from the circle does not feel like a small social inconvenience. It feels like an attack on your basic sense of safety. That is why your hands go cold. That is why your chest tightens. That is why panic begins to rise even when nothing obviously dramatic has happened. And the most subtle, most unkind people know how to use that. They do not always insult you. They do not always say anything harsh. Sometimes they only need one thing: to make no room for you, not to let you in, not to look at you, not to answer you. And with that alone they do a great deal. They make you feel unworthy of warmth, unworthy of attention, unworthy of the simplest form of human inclusion. The ugliest part is that afterward you can hardly accuse them of anything. If you say, "I feel like you're ignoring me," they can easily answer, "What are you talking about? We were just talking. You're taking this too personally." And once again, you become the guilty one. Not the people who built the wall around you, but you, as if you were just too sensitive, too anxious, too suspicious. I want to tell you a story that made something very clear to me. In moments like these, you do not beg for a place. You protect your dignity. In those years, I often spent time in gatherings where men from our town would come together to discuss news, business, local stories, or just sit and talk. In one of those circles, there was a man. Let's call him Leonard. Leonard was loud, confident, loved attention, and always kept a tight ring of listeners around him. People like that love to feel like they are the center of the room. And then there was another man there. Let's call him Michael. Michael was quiet, kind, a little shy. He did not know how to enter a space forcefully. He did not know how to seize the air around him, but he deeply wanted to be part of the group. He wanted to be accepted, heard, included. And I watched the same scene unfold many times. Leonard would be standing by the fireplace or by a table surrounded by a few people. Michael would come closer, smile, try to stand beside them, listen, and every now and then try to add a sentence of his own. But in that moment, something almost invisible would happen. Leonard would shift a shoulder slightly. Someone else would move half a step. Another person would close the gap, and Michael would once again find himself outside. Nothing obvious. No one told him to leave. No one said, "Don't come over here." But the whole shape of their bodies, the whole physical language of the group was saying exactly that. You are extra. You are not inside. You belong at the edge. Michael kept trying. He stood on his toes. He leaned in. He laughed when they laughed. He agreed with what was being said. He hoped that if he stayed just a little longer, the circle would eventually open. But it never did. And at a certain point, the painful thing was no longer that he was being shut out. The painful thing was how hard he was trying to be let in. That was when something became very clear to me. Some circles are not circles of friendship at all. They are just another shape of someone else's vanity. Some people like keeping someone nearby whom they can exclude, because it makes them feel more important by comparison. They need someone standing outside the door so they can feel even more strongly that they themselves are supposedly inside something special. Over time, that truth became very clear to me. If a circle does not open for you on its own, if you have to earn the most basic right to be present, then that is no longer a place of respect. And if there is no respect for you there, then there is nothing there worth fighting for. Later, I noticed that Michael gradually stopped approaching that group. Instead, he found two other people, quiet men like himself, men he could speak with without that inner coldness, without fighting for the right to be seen. And that was when something changed in his face. More calm, more dignity, more inner weight. Because a person stops looking small the moment they stop knocking on doors that were never going to open. So if you feel that certain people always leave you outside, if they do not look at you, do not make room for you, and your words keep falling past them, do not try to earn the right to be included. Do not ask for attention where it is handed to you like charity. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply step out of someone else's circle and stop playing the role of the person waiting to be invited in. Build your own circle. Let it be smaller. Let it be just one or two people, but let it be a circle where there is truly a place for you. Your dignity will always be worth more than a role in someone else's cold performance. So, my friends, today we walked through 3 more signs of hidden hatred: name distortion, the exposure of secrets, and exclusion from the circle. At first glance, all of this can still seem small. The way someone talks to you, someone else's carelessness, a certain kind of coldness in a group. But these are often the things that cut the deepest, because now the attack is no longer aimed only at your mood or your peace of mind. It is aimed at your face, your dignity, your sense of where you stand among other people. And the most dangerous part of these forms of hostility is that they almost always hide behind something that looks harmless. A joke, familiarity, an accident. You're imagining it. That is why so many people tolerate them for far too long. Not because they are weak, but because they keep trying to interpret another person's behavior in the best possible light. But if someone keeps making you smaller through your name, if they bring into the open what you trusted them with in private, if being around them leaves you feeling excluded again and again, then this is no longer an accident. It is a pattern. And the sooner you stop excusing it, the sooner you begin to get your footing back. But this is still not the end. In part 3, we will come to the final 3 signs, the ones that work even more quietly, more cleverly, and reach even deeper into your self-worth. We are going to talk about the people who reduce your success, twist your words, and make you feel invisible even when you are sitting right in front of them. And that is also where the most important ending of this entire series is waiting for us. The one idea that makes the whole path worth following to the end. If this conversation mattered to you, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the final part. And please tell me in the comments which of these 3 signs you have seen most often in your own life. I value those stories, because behind every one of them there is a real struggle to hold on to yourself. And next, we go even deeper. Protect your dignity, and do not let anyone make you smaller than you really are.